The evidence supports the view that we have lost a whole civilization from our historical record. We are a species with amnesia.
So we're going to have to forgive universally and move to this creative moment as a species.
We, humans, are creating what is called the sixth mass extinction of life.
Peace comes from a different place. It starts by seeing within others and within ourselves that which is not selfish, but is brave and generous and idealistic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Video Shaman podcast. I'm your host, Alex Lipton. It's been quite a while since I did a stream, and I would have to say I'm grateful for the time that I took to live my life and have some real present life experiences that sometimes you have to live in the moment. You don't want to live vicariously through the camera, because when you're doing that, you're kind of projecting yourself into the future. You want to remember that there's a camera kind of built into your biology, and you have to live through that. So if you're in that state of mind or in that state of existence, kind of the camera work will happen automatically and effortlessly. You won't have to try to capture stuff. The capturing will happen automatically. But this talk I want to do is going to be a little bit about perception, a little bit about consciousness, synchronicity, the state of the world, and how we are living in it right now. And I want to start off with a video that I think is going to really demonstrate what exactly I'm talking about when I mean perception and how perception controls reality. When we're paying attention to one thing, we may be missing something else. It's really all about the command, and that's what mentalism is all about. It's the idea that we can program our perception to be seeing whatever we're seeing, and perceiving that becomes our reality, but we might be missing something else. So without further ado, I want to show you this really, really cool video that demonstrates this whole idea about perception. Okay, so this is something you can find on YouTube, and just follow along if you haven't seen this before. I think you're in for a little treat here, so let's check it out.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
That says it all right there. It's easy. What was the quote there? It's easy to miss something you're not looking for. That is the reality of our world today, everybody. If we're not looking for it, we might not see it. And we have to understand that when it comes to the media, when it comes to consciousness in the world and what we're paying attention to today, oftentimes we're being guided to look at something that is intentionally designed to hide something else. And the state of the world right now, we're in this real final death blow of the paradigm of the illusion of separation, this idea of one side versus the other. And there is a purpose to this illusion. There is a polarity to our experience. I mean, it's totally represented in the human biology, where even the brain itself has two hemispheres, the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. They both process information differently, but they are oftentimes, one is more in control, so to speak, than the other. So we kind of go through the day shifting between right hemisphere, left hemisphere, kind of like on a bell curve. And then even the balance between the heart and the mind, the heart being the sum of all of our experiences, our feelings, and then the mind being this vast, limitless perception of awareness. So there's the mind, which sees, articulates reality, and then you have the heart, which really gets you into a state of feeling, when you feel good or you feel bad. But there could be an infinite number of ways to look at something. Another good example of that is a magnet. You have a positive pole on a magnet and a negative pole on the magnet. They both attract in different ways. One attracts, one repels, but they are completely connected in one whole. A battery, another perfect example, positive pole and a negative pole. But if you wanted to use a battery in any sort of electronic equipment, you can't really, say, okay, we're just going to choose which side of the battery is the correct side of the battery and then cut the battery and then expect your electronics to work. You have to have both of these poles together to create a unity. So there is an illusion of separation of positive, negative forces in reality, but it's not the true nature of reality. The true nature of reality is a wholeness. It's a unity. It's these things coming together that allow the electronics to work, or our biology to work. So I think that video is really cool because it shows to me a lot about the world that we're in right now with this illusion of separation. We're being poised to make a choice that, like, we're at a crossroads, and depending on which side you're on or which road you go down, we can be in two completely different realities. But I would say it's more like we're at the edge of a cliff, and the choice we're really about to make is, okay, well, which foot, right foot or left foot, would you like to step off this cliff with? And we're being programmed to think that somehow whether you're going with the right foot or the left foot is going to make a difference, when in reality we're just going to be jumping off this cliff into the abyss. So the real question is to stop, reflect, and be present and recognize your surroundings. What brought us to this edge of the cliff is the real question we should be asking. And the moonwalking bear analogy, I think, is relevant because especially when it comes to the political landscape of today, where you seem to have on one side the Republicans or the right-wing MAGA extremists, and then you've got the Democrats, which are the liberal and more progressive global kind of perspective. They both are operating from the same system. And this is the moonwalking bear. This is the part we're not paying attention to, is that both of these so-called political parties are controlled and operated by the same hidden group, the same moonwalking bear, so to speak. And I think what is so important right now we need to recognize is how powerful the mind really is, how powerful we really are as human beings, that we actually have superpowers, super magical powers. And what are these powers, you might ask? They're not necessarily the hyper focused or hyper superficial things like in superhero movies, like being able to fly or having invincibility or anything like that. The human being has superpowers that are much more simple and kind of in our face. We're just not paying attention to them. We're taking them for granted. Things like compassion, things like empathy, kindness. These are human superpowers that when we actually use them, we can pierce right through all of the illusion of bullshit. This idea that one side is better than the other and everybody's different than you. And even another breakdown of the two things, you have the self and others. But when you start to use compassion and kindness towards yourself, really start from within, like all the ancient wisdom masters have always said, the answers lie within. If you're kind to yourself, if you show compassion to yourself, empathy to yourself, if you have integrity and these types of things, and you start to actually live a much happier and healthier life, and then that will radiate out to these so-called others. I've talked about this in previous podcasts before, but the choice point is not, do you choose yourself or others? The real choice point is more of a focus point. You want to focus in on what it is the self, not to be selfish, but what is the self? If you go within, the answers lie within. Like in the Matrix, the Oracle tells Neo, know thyself. And when you know yourself, you will know God. That is like the key takeaway, one of the key takeaway lessons and golden rules within the Matrix. But it's not a choice between yourself and others. It's a focus point to focus in on what it is that governs and radiates and emanates from the self. Choose the self and learn to expand your sense of self to include others. See, the choice between self and others is more of a linear path, like we talked about the so-called choice point, the point, the crossroads at the end of the path where you can go one way or the other. That's a linear perspective where it's beginning, middle, and end, and kind of like a branch moving down a line. Whereas what I'm talking about is more of a holographic, higher dimensional or three-dimensional way to look at it, where you start in the center and where your self is and expand your sense of self to include others. Because when you start to treat others with respect, with integrity, with empathy and compassion, that makes you feel good. And when you start to treat yourself with compassion, kindness, and all of these empathetic forces of human superpower, then you start to realize that every single person on this planet, every single thing is just all part of the same whole, and you treat others with respect. This is what all of the indigenous cultures share, even across the world and through time itself. These sayings like Matakwe o Aisen, or in Lakesh, or Aloha, or even in Avatar, I see you, I see myself in you, because we are just in a big hall of mirrors. And so if we start to treat ourselves with kindness and respect, we'll start to treat others with self and kindness and respect, and we start to realize this is one big family. So this is what the moonwalking bear is in the world, that as much as we're focusing on the separation, we are not going to be paying attention to the unity, because it's really all about consciousness and where we put our attention. And it's so incredibly simple and powerful that once you start to use your power of perception, it changes the nature of reality itself. Reality is not finite, it's not solid, it's not deterministic. It's got a probability and possibility. It's a creation. There is an evolution of creation going on, and at the same time, we have this opportunity to create evolution. Evolution is not going to be just the changing of the physical mechanism of the human body or the world. The evolution is going to be a spontaneous event where we start to actually have an influence over what the future is going to be, because it's not random, it's intentional. This is the irony of what intelligent design is. And intelligent design is a subject that has been co-opted by religious people around the world. Like there's an intelligent designer, like there's some sort of god that's manipulating like us. We're like puppets being controlled by some intelligent designer. Something created us. If he's kind of take a step back and look for the moonwalking bear in that scenario, it comes from this paradigm of separation, that there is a creator and a creation, and the creator creates the creation. But what intelligent design actually is, ironically, was formulated by a scientist who started to realize that there actually is not, it's not a random unfolding of the universe, that there is some sort of pattern. There is some sort of pattern recognition that's inherent within the system. The founding fathers of the United States, and this is not just from them, this is from a legacy of understanding consciousness and our relationship to nature. They had this term in the Declaration of Independence called, "We hold these truths to be self-evident," meaning that there is a pattern within the system. And if you understand the pattern, then you can actually start to live more in harmony with God. You know, it doesn't feel like we're as separate from it. So it's really important that when we're paying attention to the separation, that's all that will manifest in the world. And the more people that actually believe that and act on that perception, that's the world that we're going to see around us collectively. But when we pay attention to the unity, when we pay attention to the synchronicity and the alignment of these things, then we're actually going to start to see more alignment. And the best way to do that is to start in your own day-to-day life. Consciousness is reality, and really consciousness is the mind. Everything is the mind. The mind is everything. The universe is a mental character. And this is what quantum physics is all about. And I know quantum physics, you can go to school and become a physicist, get a degree and learn all the science jargon, and it could be very complicated to be a quantum physicist. Like watch any movie like Oppenheimer. You know, not everybody can necessarily invoke all of the Latin terms to understand like physics and build some sort of technology like that. But nevertheless, there is something very simple to quantum physics, which is all about how everything is energy. Everything is in a field of consciousness. Even though you can't see energy sometimes, it's still connected to you. And depending on what you're paying attention to, the so-called matter or physical world can actually change. And this is the whole double slit experiment in quantum physics, is that depending on whether or not you're paying attention to a particle, if you're looking at it, it will be a particle. It will have a physical characteristic. Or if you're not paying attention to it, it actually is a wave. This is the idea that our consciousness is influencing the so-called outside world. It's not just a spiritual metaphysical concept. It's a physical reality, that the physical world is shaped by our consciousness. It's a field, and we're like little tuning forks that when the energy or the field or the frequency is resonating, it influences the world. A great example of this in a real experiment are the opera singers, that when they're singing at such a high frequency and they have the glass little goblet, when they sing at the high frequency and they're like, ah, like it can actually cause the glass to shatter, because the frequency and vibration coming from the singer interferes with the matter and the molecules inside the glass, and at the right frequency causes them to vibrate and shatter. So frequency is affecting the physical world, and that is so important to recognize right now, because with the world being the way it is right now, we can actually change it. And that's one of the things that I know I've thought about a lot is I want to change the world. And if anybody has a heart and a soul, and you see discomfort and pain and suffering in the world, and if you have a heart, you want to change that. You want to improve people's lives. You want to help. If you see something wrong, you want to help. That's just the natural reflex reaction to it. But it's coming from this perspective again, which is this illusion of separation, that the world is outside of you and that you have this responsibility to change the world. There's like, we have to change the world. We have to stop the bad things from happening because the future could be this or that. And it's like, we have to change the world. We have to help the world. I'm posing a different idea, that maybe we don't have to change the world, because that idea is that the world is outside of ourselves. We don't have to change the world. We have to recognize the world is a reflection in a lot of ways of what's going on within ourselves, individually and collectively. And it's not about changing the world. It's about doing a little pole shift, a reversal of it, and changing yourself, changing your perception of the world. And when you change the perception of the world, just like in the Moonwalking Bear video, you'll start to see things that you were not paying attention to before, simply because you weren't looking for them. If you're looking and asking the right questions, you'll start to realize that actually the world doesn't need to be changed. The world is exactly the way it should be in order to teach us something, so that we can actually have the true freedom of coming to that awareness without having to be forced to do it. That is free will. Free will is this idea of kind of forgetting and then allowing yourself to remember. It's not that which choice do you make. It's about recognizing that you've made both choices, and that it's about the balance. It's understanding that both of these so-called sides are there to give us a framework so that we can have an epiphany to get us to be more in harmony with ourselves and the world. So the world's kind of freaking me out a lot of the times, because, again, this idea that we have to change the world, and there's this big push towards, like, oh, well, we're heading towards a fascist dictatorship. And like, just for an example here, like Donald Trump and Joe Biden, here we are again, trying the same exact thing like we did in 2020, but expecting different results. Oh, well, we're just going to do a rematch, and one side's right and one side's wrong. And supposedly half the country says, oh, well, Donald Trump is the savior of the world. And the other half of the country says, no, Joe Biden's the one saving the world. And we're faced with this bullshit choice, kind of like in the game Monkey in the Middle, where as you're in the Monkey in the Middle, you're running, trying to catch the ball. You're running to Joe Biden, trying to get the ball, but then they throw the ball to the other side. You have to turn around, run to the other side, and to Donald Trump, and then they're throwing the ball back, and we're just going back and forth, and eventually getting exhausted, because that's the whole nature of the game. How do you win Monkey in the Middle? How do you truly win that game? It's kind of impossible, similar to tic-tac-toe. If you really understand how to play tic-tac-toe or Monkey in the Middle, you realize it's impossible to win that game, especially if the two players, like in Monkey in the Middle, are taller than you. There's literally no way you can catch the ball. So how do you win that game? How do you win the game? You don't play it. You stop. You stop and walk away. Like the Moonwalking Bear, you start to ask a different question. What am I actually doing here? Is it one side versus the other? Or is there something bigger going on? Is there a third hidden perspective that could ultimately get me to have the peace that I'm looking for, have the peace that you're looking for? How do you stop this? You stop playing. You don't win by trying over and over again. You win by stopping the game. So I see what's going on right now as actually, no, there's actually the third hidden perspective, that this is not a choice point between one direction or another. This has just been the long continuation of an agenda that's been in place for a very, very long time. I mean, we're talking like thousands of years here, but just for all intents and purposes, we're going to say that this started, let's just start at the end of World War II, when you have two sides. You have the Axis and the Allies. You got the Nazis and the Americans and the British and all that stuff. And allegedly the Nazis lost and the Americans won. And here we've been living in a new world order, so to speak, where you have these different superpowers. And then as the 20th century unfolded, the Russians and the Cold War and everything like that. But this idea of the Nazis, how this fascist dictatorship was defeated and has not been existent, and there are people talking about, oh, well, the Nazis are Donald Trump and the Nazis and the white supremacy. I'm gonna pose a different idea to you. This is the Moonwalking Bear idea, just to stick with that metaphor, that actually the Nazis didn't lose the war. The Nazis won the war in a different way. They learned that in order to take over the world, you cannot forcibly take away people's power, because people will resist. Look at D-Day. I mean, the world was like, no, we're not going to be stomped on by the jackboot of tyranny here. We're going to fight back because you can't take my freedom. Once you have freedom, it's going to be very hard to just give it away. So what happened was the Nazis kind of learned that in order to impose tyranny on the world and to have a new world order or a Reich, an empire for 1,000 years, you have to create such a world that is so chaotic, so unstable, so destructive, and make people so afraid that people will willingly give up their freedom for the promise of safety and security. And we've been my whole lifetime, and even before that, the whole 20th century has just been a slow deployment of this chaos world, a world so chaotic that people are they just willingly will give up their freedom. One example is after 9/11 with the Patriot Act. The terrorist attack was so chaotic and so bad that people were like, oh, we can't let this happen again. So please, you surveil us. I'll willingly give up my freedom, and you can surveil all my life, violate the First Amendment, and really gut out what it means to be an American ideologically so that we'll be safe. And they say, well, if you have nothing to hide, then you shouldn't have anything to worry about. But that's just the sneakiness of this whole thing, is that the Nazi mentality of a supremacy of an elite group of people over everybody else is what this is all about. And that to me is when I look at the world today, I'm like, okay, well, we're talking about the Fourth Reich here. The Third Reich was the militaristic takeover of the world and met with resistance. The Fourth Reich is the implementation of a tyranny of the mind, of a tyranny of consciousness that gets us to be so afraid of ourselves, of other people, of the world, the future, of everything, that we'll lock ourselves in a cage willingly and just bow down to this, to this ruler, this big brother, like from 1984 and all the George Orwell stories, so that we'll be safe. And what voting really is not about voting which side do you want. The voting is just simply a ritual to authorize and consent to our demise. It's not which button do you push. It's recognizing that both of those buttons are cooked into the same system, metaphorically and literally, that just allows and authorizes the fascism to occur. And that's really the whole nature of free will and control. A lot of people will say that there's in conspiracy land that there's a small group of people that's controlling the world. And that's met with pushback because how? Like, people's like, how is there, if there was a conspiracy like that, how could this small group of people just conspire to get all of these different forces together to make such a world conspiracy happen? Well, that's again the moonwalking bear. It's not that there's a small group of people controlling the world. There's a small group of people, this billionaire 1% class, which I'm calling the Fourth Reich dictatorship, corporate dictatorship. They're not controlling the world, but they are influencing the world in such a way that gives them what makes them. We think they have a lot of power. They're taking away our power, but really, what's happening is they're creating a world that makes us give away our power. They don't have more power, but they give us a world where we believe they have so much power. It's in the perception that gives them the power. And what's funny is that we never lost the power. We have the power still, and we can take the power back if we change our perception of it. If we start to realize that they are not out there and there is no they, so-called they, are just a reflection of us. That it's not a war between the 99% and the 1%. It's really a war of consciousness within ourselves. And if we start to realize that they're not separate from us, then and they never took our power and we still have it, we can just rise up and realize that they need help too. They're sick. There's a sickness, a program running in the so-called they that gets us to want to fight each other out of fear. So if we let go of the fear, recognize the function to fear, it's not to run away from it. It's to embrace it and to kind of let it come through us so that we realize that there's a purpose. What was the fear trying to teach us? It was a protection mechanism. So let's get out of the protection mechanism and get into the growth mechanism. Everything is mind, everything is consciousness, and you are so powerful. I've learned so much about quantum physics and how reality is governed by the mind and our consciousness, but then even more so than quantum physics, it's the biology. Physically, we are not victims of our genes, as my uncle Bruce talks about. It's actually our consciousness that is influencing the way that the genes express themselves. Genes don't turn on and off, but our consciousness can actually change the way they express it. So you're not a victim of your genes, you're actually a master of your genes. This is what epigenetics is all about. And when you realize that, things like disease, psychological disorders, behavioral disorders, self-destructive behavior, and violence in these things are actually just, they're not inherently built into our genes like the Darwinists would say, or the neo-Darwinists, that just nature and is inherently violent and will always lead to this type of behavior. It's actually just a program. It's a belief acting out of this separation. So it's really cool when you go down the rabbit hole, you start to see that when you go down the rabbit hole, you start to ask yourself a question. Where is this going? Where does the rabbit hole go? And you may come to a point where you end up down the rabbit hole, and you have to find your way out, and you have to get out of the rabbit hole. But if you recognize what this is all about, the rabbit hole leads you right back to where you started, but with a new perception. And that is the key. This is the hero's journey. This is the shamanistic experience of walking out of your day-to-day life, finding a new perception, and then coming back and realizing that just because you think you know something, you may not actually know it. And it might sound like a little cryptic, but the whole idea of the rabbit hole is that we can actually go down this rabbit hole and learn something new about ourselves. We may not create something new, but we will have a new perception that can change the way we see the world, and therefore change the world we are looking to change. And that is the beautiful thing, is that this whole matrix can come down and a new matrix can be revealed. A matrix being like a system of how we perceive reality, the collective programming of everything. And I think that when we wake up to this reality, and I think I'm gonna end it here, because there's a lot of interesting stuff that we talked about, and I'm not didn't really have a full beginning, middle, and end in mind when I made this, or when we're making it right now. But I think we'll end it with the idea about waking up and going to sleep. So like, there's this idea, when we wake up to the new reality, then we will be free. But the irony is that when you wake up, the question is, are you actually awake? This is what the movie Inception was all about. Or even in the Matrix, how do you actually know if you're really awake or not? And then to say, oh, well, the people that are asleep, we need to wake them up. There are the people who are awake and the people who are asleep. There's that illusion of separation again. But the idea is dreams within dreams. I'm sure you might have had an experience where you've been in a dream and asleep, and you wake up, and then you go and walk about, and then you start to realize, no, wait, I'm still in a dream. You woke up from one dream into another. And biologically speaking, your body cannot tell the difference between whether or not you're in a dream or you're awake. That's how dreams can feel so real when you're in them, until, of course, you have this glimpse of being lucid. If you have a lucid dream and you wake up within the dream, and you realize, oh my God, I'm dreaming. And if you're having a nightmare and something really is horrible happening to you, and you wake up and in the dream you become lucid, guess what? Then you are truly free. Then you could fly out of there. It's not about waking up versus going to sleep. It's about waking up within the dream. So even when you have that definitive moment where you actually do wake up into your norm, from the dream into the reality, remember this. Ask yourself this: am I still dreaming? What is it I'm not paying attention to right now? How am I, where are the parameters or the limitations of this world that I'm in, or in my own biology, that keep me asleep while I'm awake? A lot of people are sleepwalking. So it's not about waking up. It's about becoming lucid, becoming aware. And this is the fractal nature of the universe. This is what the rabbit hole is all about, because the question comes down to this. Once you go down the rabbit hole, did you ever really leave, or did you ever really make it out of the rabbit hole? Some people will have a fear moment because it gets kind of chaotic when you go down the rabbit hole, and it's like things that you will learn, the things that you will learn can be so alarming and just shattering to your reality that you just, at some point, you have to make a choice and say, look, like, I can't live in this world. I have to go back to the Matrix. I have to go back. I have a job. I have a family. I have things to do in order to survive. You have to eat. You can't just like sleep all the time, because if you're in a coma, for example, like if you're just perpetually in the dream world, in the sleep world, you need to have machines hooked up to you in a hospital setting in order to stay alive, because you do need to like feed the system. So you have to make a choice. Oh, I can't live in the rabbit hole all the time. So we are all doing this. We are all choosing to say, no, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready to live in the fractal nature of the oneness yet. I will remain in this illusion of separation. I will choose to go to sleep, and then I will choose to wake up, and I will live in this back and forth world. But the question is this: where's the moonwalking bear? How can we break free of this polarity? Not throw it away. Recognize the purpose. What is the purpose of this? And then find that moonwalking bear. What is the third hidden perspective that I'm not seeing? And that is called becoming lucid, becoming aware. This is what it's all about. And I really do believe that if we do this, if we start to change our perception and just ask ourselves, what is it? And remember, there may not be an answer. Maybe the answer is self-evident, and it's only something that you can choose. It's not something that can be given to you. If anybody comes up on a stage and says, I have the answers to the universe and I will share them to you, I will present to you the moonwalking bear, I would be very weary and questioning of that person, whoever that is, because I really do believe that the best teaching is to recognize that the moonwalking bear is within you, a hidden thing that no one else can tell you. No one can explain that to you. They can give you insights, but a true teacher, what are they going to do? They're not going to tell you anything. They're not going to show you anything. What they're going to do is they're going to hold up a mirror. They're going to hold up a mirror, and a really good guru, really good teacher, they are a mirror. They are living mirrors. So when you're looking at them, they're reflecting right back to you what you already know. And no one can tell you what it is. And what's beautiful about it is that one person's answer to what that is, one person's moonwalking bear, may be something completely different to somebody else. And right now, we're just so caught up in trying to, my moonwalking bear is the actual moonwalking bear. No, this is the moonwalking bear. No, did you see what I saw? No, did you see what I saw? And that is all irrelevant. There are forces and entities in the world, in the experience of our lives, that are trying to get us to capitalizing on the question of like, there is only one answer. There is only one authority, and this is what it is. That's not true. That's part of the deception. The deception is that we need to all learn to trust. And this is the last thing I'll say. This is one of the amazing superpowers of humanity that we are struggling with right now, because we've come from a place of thousands of years of mistrust, being abused, being victimized, being lied to, that how do we even trust anybody, let alone trust ourselves? How do we trust our minds? Because the subconscious is a very powerful thing, and it tricks us all the time. Again, we only see what we're paying attention to, what our programs are guiding us to. So that's something that we need to heal, is if we learn to trust ourselves and trust that there is a purpose, there is a design, there's a reason, there's a pattern to this. And if we trust in that process, then we will start to become more whole. Then we could start to let go. That's part of the mystery of life. The answer is a mystery. And that is what it is. It's a self-evident mystery. And every single person has a key to that. And we have to learn to trust and see that within everybody else. Just because someone may appear to be asleep and not having the answers doesn't mean that they don't have the answers. So we have to try smarter and not harder. If you really want to change other people, if you really want to help other people, and you want to change the world, we have to change the way we think about the whole thing. We have to start looking for that moonwalking bear. So I hope this was interesting, and I'm looking forward to having more of these. We're going to get more into the concept of the Fourth Reich later. It's something I want to do a whole presentation on. And also I have a good presentation maybe I'll give to you next time. It's the whole idea about the hidden truth, part 1. The hidden truth about reality and the Matrix and our whole history that we have just not been paying attention to. So thank you so much, everybody. You can follow me on social media, The Nautilus Fan. You can follow me on Twitter, X, whatever. I'll post links and descriptions in here, but definitely learn to find the superpower within, moonwalking bear within. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others, recognize compassion, empathy, and that's where you will find bliss. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
That we have lost a whole civilization from our historical record. We are a species with amnesia.
So we're going to have to forgive universally and move to this creative moment as a species.
We, humans, are creating what is called the sixth mass extinction of life.
Peace comes from a different place. It starts by seeing within others and within ourselves that which is not selfish, but is brave and generous and idealistic.